Hey, what's going on, guys? Well, we finally reached that point. It is time for my final She-Ra and the Princesses of Power reaction. Today is Season 5, Episode 13, the series finale. Oh my gosh, wow. Can't believe we've finally gotten to this point. I started this show back in May. It was about the beginning of May, couple weeks before the final season was coming out. I had no idea at the time how much I was going to love this show, but I watched the first few episodes and absolutely loved it. And so after that, I decided to take my time with it, not just try to rush through it so that I could get caught up before the final season, even taking a break between seasons. And on top of that, I decided to do a review for each season, give my thoughts in depth, which was a lot of fun. I loved getting to do that. And I even decided to give my reactions to the final season, which I'm so glad I did because this season has been absolutely insane. If you've seen my previous two reactions, you know that I have just been all over the place. I've even been genuinely upset, which I've acknowledged that that's how I'm supposed to feel. So I'm going to take a different approach this time around. I'm going to focus on the good stuff, because no matter how this ending goes, whether it includes everything that I want it to, whether it's fully satisfying, whatever the case may be, I'm not going to let it take away from just how amazing this show has been. I've absolutely loved this show. I've loved giving my thoughts on it, reacting to it, and I've loved talking to you guys in the comments and hearing what you think. So thank you guys so much for that. Whether you've been here since my first review of Season 1 or whether you're just checking out this reaction because you want to see someone else react to the final season, thank you. And to Noelle Stevenson and everybody else who's involved in the production of the show, if by any chance you're watching this, I just want to sincerely thank you for your work. This show has been absolutely amazing, and as sad as I'm going to be to see it go, and I'm sure this final episode is going to be just as much of a roller coaster ride for me as the last two were, I want to at least start on that note, and I'm going to go in optimistic, trusting that the creative team who has brought me 5 really good seasons will bring this to a satisfying conclusion. So, alright, let's not prolong it anymore. She-Ra and the Princess of Power series finale. Let's go. Well, guys, that was the end. Okay. You always have mixed feelings whenever a series comes to an end. I, of course, have things I will talk about, but just right now, that was amazing. That was beautiful. It was a fantastic ending. It managed to include things that I didn't think it would. And it was so especially satisfying because after the last 2 episodes, you were so worried that things weren't going to work out. But they did. Catra and Adora. What else is there to say? Them finally saying they love each other. That kiss. That was just so beautiful. It was such a well-earned moment that we've been waiting for so long. I absolutely loved it. Let's go through each great, satisfying moment, and some of them may be similar, but She-Ra coming in, just making Etheria this absolutely great place. That was stunning animation. The animators and the design team deserve major props for that. The Hordak moment was really interesting. That was a very... Again, I'm going to be making a lot of Star Wars references, but you know, it just comes with this kind of premise. That was a very Vader, let's kill Luke Skywalker, but then he turns on the Emperor instead. And I didn't think it would be so satisfying, because Hordak is a villain who did a lot of really bad things, but you also have come to understand him over time and why he was eventually the way he was, what he was trying to achieve, and so you at least understood him a bit more. And when he was saying, I gave myself a name, I am Hordak, I reject your will, that was a great moment, because yes, he did used to be a villain when he was doing all that stuff, but in his mind, when he was taking over Etheria, he thought that he was still serving Prime's will in some way, that and he was trying to be like Prime, but he's put that aside and, embraced his friendship with Entrapta, which is a great theme throughout this entire season, and especially in these last few episodes, the theme of relying on true friendships and relationships to overcome stuff, which, if not properly executed, can be really cliche. Catra and Adora professing their love for each other and kissing, like, obviously that's something that happens in a lot of shows like this, so if not done right, it can be really cliche, but you just love each of these characters so much. They have been so well developed, and there have just been so many unbelievable emotional moments that feel proper to the story and earned that you can't help but saying yes when it finally happens. Now, obviously, let's talk about, because this is just the thing with TV shows, especially ones with this kind of premise that you absolutely love. There's always going to be something more that you could say. And yes, I will freely admit that I'm sad the show is over, because especially with the way it ends, there is so much potential to how they can continue the story. Like, so again, I'd be lying if on some level I, wish they could have included that stuff, or I'm sad that there's not a follow-up, at least at this time. But let's think logically about this, because that can really help when you're analyzing a story. There's always more that you can tell. There's always some way that the story could be continued, but I do appreciate that they've said, you know what, let's give the story the amount of attention it needs and then not drag it on anymore, so it feels like a really tightly knit narrative. And the whole premise, like, it ends with a shot of our 4 main characters looking up into space and say, how are you guys up for a road trip? Which, no, it does kind of feel like a lead into another season that's not going to happen, but that's also kind of a good thing, because don't you want to feel like these characters' lives are going to continue once the series is over? Because those are really good series finales, in my opinion, is that they manage to strike a balance between feeling like this is the definitive closing chapter to this section of the story, but it also shows that things are going to continue once these characters are gone, because you want this world to still feel like it's alive, like things are still going on. Even though I'll freely admit that simply because of it ending in certain ways that maybe they could have tweaked it, I'd be lying if I said that didn't bother me a little bit, but at the same time, I also kind of love it, because it feels like the story is continuing even if we're not going to get to see it. Other shows have done it, like, again, no spoilers, but I felt the Star Wars Rebels series finale handled this really well. I felt the way that they handled the ending, it felt like, yes, they did a good job wrapping up this story and making it feel complete within itself with certain ways that they go about it, but they also make it feel like, okay, there is a story that's going, which some people didn't like this one particular detail, because it's like, oh, well, we just finished this show and it's like already setting up another thing, but that's also a good thing, because it makes it feel like these characters' lives are going to continue once the show is over. So, and again, I'm stressing, like, if they decide at some point to make a sequel series to this or continue it as a comic, which that's what Avatar and Legend of Korra have done. Like, obviously, Avatar, The Last Airbender ended, and then a few years later they decided to make a sequel series called Legend of Korra. And both shows have been continued as graphic novels. I've got them on my shelf over there, and I love, because even if it's in comic book form, I just like knowing that a story is continuing in some way. But even if they do none of that, if Noelle Stevenson says, no, let's not do a sequel, let's not continue it as a comic, if this is the ending, it feels like it is a proper wrap-up to the 5 seasons that we have seen so far, but it also says, okay, here's this new story, this new adventure that our characters are going to go on, even if you're not going to get to see it. So now whenever I'm rewatching the series or I'm reflecting upon it, even though it's over and I will be emotional about that, I can at least take comfort knowing that it at least feels like the story is being continued for our characters, even if we don't get to see it. And one other detail I forgot to mention is that Adora, when she is in the heart of Etheria and being taken over by Horde Prime's fire, she actually has a vision of what the future looked like. And at first I was really mad about that, because I thought that they were setting up that she's seeing this life that she's then not going to have. But then they turned it around to serving a different purpose, Horde Prime trying to get to her. But that was a really smart detail to throw in, because that gives you an idea of what the future is probably going to look like. Adora and Catra living happily ever after and being together. And Glimmer and Bo said in the last episode that they love each other, so that maybe seems to hint that Bo has become the king at that point, or at least I guess, I don't know how far in the timeline. And they mention Scorpia throwing a ball that presumably everyone's going. So even though they didn't show the kind of scene after all our characters win that I maybe would have liked to see afterwards, they did technically show it earlier. So yeah, that's actually not as big a problem as I thought it was, because they did give us a glimpse of that possibility. So yeah, the more I talk about it out loud, the more I hear myself working through all the details, the more I realize that there's actually not as much for me to be upset about as I thought, and that this was actually a pretty brilliant way to end the series, even if there are some details that I personally would like to see that they maybe could have tweaked a little bit. Obviously not totally perfect, but it was an incredibly emotional episode. It delivered the payoff we have been waiting so long to see. The animation was beautiful, so many great character moments, and now I can reflect on this show and rewatch it in a positive way, knowing how it ends and feeling like the story will continue. So yeah, I, for the most part, am satisfied. Is there anything else I want to talk about? I just want to make sure I don't miss anything. See, I talked about Catra and Adora, Bone Glimmer, Seahawk and Mermista. A lot of cute character moments. Oh, and Shadow Weaver's sacrifice. That was a really powerful moment. I kept being worried that Adora would sacrifice herself or Catra would sacrifice herself, and, you know, it is a little predictable to have Shadow Weaver be the one instead, but the way they go about it was just so effective. Because for so long now, she's been on the good guy's side. She has been trying to achieve noble goals, but she's still kind of been the same person, but for her to finally put others first and tell Catra that she's sorry and proud of her, it's really powerful. And it was sad seeing Adora and Catra's reaction, because however much Shadow Weaver has done to them, she still raised them. So, and another really surprising moment that I didn't expect is when Adora is cleansing Hordak's mind of Horde Prime and getting rid of him. There's a brief flashback to when Hordak found Adora for the first time when she was an infant, and that was a really interesting moment, because up until now it seemed like, you know, in flashbacks that he didn't care about Adora as much. It was Shadow Weaver who did, and he said certain things, but we've learned that there's more to Hordak than we originally thought, and, you know, that was the first time he found her at all. So it's kind of an interesting detail to throw in, like they give us a little something to think about. And also, for better or worse, this is the guy that Adora committed so much of her life to and believed in his cause. So it was kind of a nice moment between them, because he's been the catalyst of so much of her life. So it was a nice, almost seemed a moment of forgiveness and recognition despite what they've been through, which is a great theme in this show. She forgave and reconciled with Catra, with Shadow Weaver, and even with Hordak. So you never expected that the villains would end up being this complex and get these kinds of endings, especially after all the horrible things they've done, but they did. And it's going to be great to go back and rewatch this show knowing what's coming, because, and instead of, you know, spacing it out, I'm going to probably watch them all in closer proximity so that I can really see the big picture. And it's going to be really great being able to analyze that, to be honest. So I'm sure there's something else I'm forgetting to mention, but with that, I'm going to bring this review to a close. I have absolutely loved this series. I've loved getting to review it. I've loved reacting to it. And I've loved getting to share it with all of you guys who have joined me, whether it's been since my reviews or these reactions. Thank you guys. And again, another huge thank you to Noelle Stevenson and everybody else involved in the show. If you happen to be watching this, thank you so much. I really do mean it. Yes, I hope that at some point we could get a sequel series or a movie or a comic continuation like we have with shows like Avatar and Korra, obviously. But the creators should do that because they want to and because they feel there is a story to happen. And do it at their own pace, not because of feeling pressure from fans. So if they do decide to do that, that's awesome. And if not, this was a satisfying conclusion, and, you know, you can leave what happens after series to your imagination. That's what fan fictions and theories are for. And now I'll talk a little bit about my channel and what's going to be happening next. Obviously, I've been focusing mainly on these reactions, for one, because I do watch one episode a day. That's been my schedule for She-Ra, one episode a day, and then taking a 2-week break between seasons. So that's why I've been mainly focusing on these reactions, but also giving myself a little more space to make sure that they're edited properly. So now that I'm not focusing on those as much, what am I going to be doing next? Well, obviously I'm going to be doing my She-Ra season 5 review. I'm not sure when that's going to come out, because I imagine I'm going to have a lot to say in that video. But I'm also thinking about doing a video essay of some kind, comparing and contrasting She-Ra and the Princesses of Power and the Star Wars sequel trilogy, because I've noticed how many similarities they have in some of their plot structure and themes, and maybe some things that I think the sequel trilogy could have learned from She-Ra and the Princesses of Power. So keep an eye out for that, because I definitely want to get to it at some point. As for actual reactions, I definitely want to get back into the Batman at some point. I feel bad because the people who are watching those reactions they were already irregular before, and then I flat out put them on hold to put on this, but I want to get into at least one episode a week for those reactions. And also some people have requested a few other shows for me to either talk about or react to, so no guarantees that I will. I may take a little break from reactions, but I'll definitely be keeping those in mind. And of course, I'll be, in addition to that She-Ra sequel trilogy video, I'm gonna do more Star Wars at some point. It's funny how my channel name is Director Jedi Nat, and my profile picture is of a Jedi, and I planned when I started this channel to mostly focus on Star Wars stuff, but I'm just the kind of guy who is interested in a lot of things and feels the need to talk about a lot of stuff, so that's kind of a general overview of what's going to be going on with my channel. And I'm not going to make any promises on schedules or release dates beyond these reactions, but thank you all again to everyone who is subscribed or watches my videos. I've loved doing these reactions, I've loved this show, and I can't wait to put more stuff out. But now that I'm done with all that stuff, I'll turn it over to you guys. What did you think of this episode? Feel free to share your thoughts down below and let me know what you think. If this is your first time on my channel, be sure to leave a like and consider subscribing. Also check out my other videos over here, it really does mean a lot. As always, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.